I'm not the kind of guy that just likes to rub stuff in people's faces all the time. I don't constantly remind people that I lost 100 pounds because I don't feel like it needs to constantly be said. And I feel like people know me, and if they know me well enough, they're gonna know that. But the truth is, I was 280 pounds, and I did lose 100 pounds, and I was overweight, and I was miserable. And I did implement a lot of the things that I talk about on my channel in order to lose that weight. But there were also a lot of things that stood in my way. So in this video, I'm gonna break down the 5 things that I think held me back the most, that slowed my weight loss, okay? Now, a lot of this stuff is in retrospect. I didn't necessarily realize it at the time, but when I look back, I realized, wow, I would have lost weight a lot faster had I known that, or had I not been doing that. Now, there are a lot of things that stood in my way. Tater tots stood in my way, enchiladas stood in my way. Those are kind of obvious things, so I'm not gonna even mention those in this video. This is gonna be a little bit more fun. Hopefully you take something practical from this, learning from someone that has been in your shoes before. I do want to make sure you hit that red subscribe button, and then please hit that little bell icon so you can turn on notifications so you know whenever I go live or anything like that. And also, guys, if you don't mind, at the end of this video, go ahead and check out ButcherBox, which is in the description down below with a link. They're a way for you to get grass-fed, grass-finished meat delivered to your doorstep. Now, super cool, inexpensive, cheaper than most grocery stores, but honestly, they're just a big sponsor of this channel and they make all this content possible. So it's a big thank you to them. So if you can, check them out after you watch this video. Okay, so we're gonna break this down into 5 things. The 5 things that I've noticed, right? And I'll talk about my experiences and sort of examples with each as well. The first one was overdoing the fats with keto. Okay, see, I've been doing keto for a long time, like since 2009-ish, so we're talking 9-10 years here. Now, I was overdoing the fats for quite a period of time because I was under the assumption that I just needed to get as many fats in to get my ketones super elevated. Now that has some merit, but you're not just trying to create ketones for the sake of ketones. Remember, your goal is still ultimately to lose some weight, right? Now the interesting thing is that fat stores easier than carbohydrates do. Now what that means is that when you have excess fat, operative word excess, is going to store easier than excess carbohydrates. Now, excess carbohydrates, I would make the argument, have long tail negative effects on our body that fats maybe don't. But when it comes down to losing weight in the short term, if you overdo the fats, you're more likely to store that fat than if you overdo carbs. Now, the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition published a study and they took a look at this and they found that when you took individuals and had them eat 50% ISOENERGETIC calories, meaning they had them overeat by 50%. They had one group overeat a bunch of carbs and one group overeat a bunch of fats. Now, what they found was pretty interesting. They found the group that overate the carbs stored about 75 to 85% of those carbs as fat, whereas the group that overate the fats ended up storing between 90 and 95% of the fats as fat. So does this mean you shouldn't do keto? No, not at all. It just means it's so easy to overdo the fats. And also, fats have way more calories per gram. So it was just very easy for me to do that. Now, I look back in hindsight, I'm like, wow, if I just had trimmed the fat back, I would have lost weight a lot faster. Now, something to be said about losing weight at a nice, sustained rate, but still, it's something to know. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is I think I relied on exercise too much. Okay, every time I would overeat, I would just do a bunch of exercise to try to make up for it. And it kind of created a bad pattern for myself. It created this natural cycle, almost this binge and purge type mentality, where I could overeat and then I would just go and just exercise. This is not healthy. And then I started doing way too much in the way of squats and I started damaging my knees. So then next thing you know, I'm like, okay, I have to reduce my calories more because now I can't even move and work out. So just so you have an idea, like squats generate 7.5 times more force on the back of our knees. That's really, really rough stuff. And it doesn't mean that squats are bad, but it means that I was falling victim to, hey Thomas, you should try to increase your testosterone levels by doing more compound movements. I've actually done some videos that break down that that's not necessarily the case. Full body movements or squats don't increase your testosterone and help you burn fat faster. You have to be sustainable. One of the reasons I got so overweight in the first place was because I beat myself up. For years and years and years, even through high school and college, I was just playing sports and beating myself up, running, rugby, this and that. And anyhow, I digress, but don't rely on exercise, rely on the diet. Okay, the third thing that really slowed my weight loss, and this is a big one, was the combination of stress, but eating when under stress. And it wasn't because of the bad decisions I would make. It would simply be because when you are eating, when you are stressed out, your body is in a strange mode. It's in a mode where it's actually going to take what you're eating and store it as fat. Even if it's somewhat healthy, it's easier to have this happen. Now, this is because when you are stressed out, you have increases in specific hormones, right? Now, we have something known as 11-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase. What this does is it converts inactive cortisone into active cortisol. Now, it just so happens that we have a lot of this enzyme in our belly fat. So what happens is when we're under stress, most of the cortisone gets converted to cortisol within our belly fat. Now, also, we have 4 times as many cortisol receptors in our belly than we do anywhere else in the body, which means that that's going to allow lipoprotein lipase to store fat in the abdomen much easier. That's why when people are under stress, they get pot bellies. They end up getting belly fat. Now, it doesn't just magically happen, because cortisol by itself is actually kind of fat burning. But when cortisol is combined with food, that's when there's a problem. Cortisol plus insulin equals almost immediate fat gain. So if you're really stressed out, as soon as you eat, it's going to affect things. So I almost recommend, if you're stressed out, just fast that day. Now, if you're stressed out every day, you shouldn't fast every day, but that's what I wish I had done. When I was stressed out, I would turn to eating, even healthy foods. What I should have done is, when I was stressed out, I should have just said, today's a good day to fast. It's going to allow my body to just capitalize on utilizing the fat that's stored, and I'm not going to store any more. Man, I look back all the times that I stress ate, man, if I just had made that decision, I probably would have lost, 50% faster. Which leads me into the next one. Don't fast all the time. I fasted way too much for a little while. Okay, I started getting addicted to the feeling. I was almost addicted to fasting. It was becoming somewhat of an eating disorder. I was just like fasting, and I realized my thyroid levels were just plummeting. Okay, so what you want to be careful of is fasting every day to the point where your thyroid levels go down. So then when you do eat, your thyroid and your metabolism is so slow that you're much more likely to store it again. You got to keep control. You should fast intermittently a few times per week. I talk about this all the time. So what you have to look for is, if your thyroid levels go down, your T3 levels go down, your TSH levels should go down or stay the same. Okay? TSH is thyroid stimulating hormone. If TSH goes up, it means your body is working really hard to try to create more thyroid, but doesn't have the juice to actually do it. That's a big problem. So if you get your lab work done, look at your T3, and if your T3 is low and your TSH is high, you have a big problem, and you need to reevaluate what you're doing. If your T3 is low and your TSH is stable or low as well, that just means that you're having a metabolic slowdown because you're losing weight, and that's pretty normal. Here's the interesting thing though. Keto makes it so that you can lower your thyroid levels, but makes it so that your body demands less thyroid, so you get more done with less. That's what's interesting. Increases what's called your thyroid sensitivity. So we'll talk about that in other videos. Don't need to, spare you the details today. And then one of the biggest things, probably honestly the biggest thing in the very beginning, was I was mixing fats and carbs all the time. Because when I first wanted to lose weight, all I did is reduce calories. So I would still eat pizza and stuff like that. I would intermittent fast and I would eat pizza. I wouldn't do keto just yet. And I would be mixing fats and carbs. And I was losing weight because my calories were restricted, but I felt like I was losing muscle. I felt like I was just kind of getting skinny fat, and I didn't like it. I didn't like the way things were happening. And it comes to find out that when you combine fats and carbs, you have pretty interesting things that happen. Okay, when you consume carbohydrates, you spike your insulin, right? And when you spike your insulin, the cell becomes receptive for nutrients to come in, which means that fat's going to come into the cell too, and it's easier to store, or at least harder to lose. You have something known as acylation stimulating protein. Okay, this ASP elevates when you consume fat, and it spikes your insulin, just like carbs do, which makes it a lot easier for your body to store fat. Now, the other thing that we have is GIP, glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide. This GIP gets elevated when you consume fat. And what it does is it enhances the fat-storing power of insulin. So when you consume fat, GIP elevates. Then when you consume carbs, insulin elevates. GIP plus insulin equals a super powerful insulin that's going to allow the insulin to let much more fat into the cell. So I'm not saying you never mix fats and carbs. You don't need to be like totally crazy about it, but I was doing it all the time. Tater tots, perfect example. Potatoes, starch, carb, plus fat, right? Just that would have made such a big difference for me. And it was just in the beginning. I realized that trick early on. But anyhow, these are 5 things that I learned, 5 things that I know slowed my weight loss, and hopefully they'll help speed up and expedite your weight loss so you don't fall victim to these same mistakes. Even if you just change one of them, I think you'll see a big impact. Anyhow, it was time to be a little bit honest, get off my soapbox for a second and just be relatable. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. See you in the next video.